Good evening and welcome to the Co-Cathedral of St. John the Evangelist. And thank you for everyone who made it through the snow to come here in person, and then thank you for everyone watching online. And I'm delighted to see everyone for our final session of the Reflections on Advent and Christmas through Art. It is a pleasure to be here with you once again. And I hope you have been enjoying the opportunity to explore the rich connection between faith and art during this special season. As we approach Christmas, our reflections naturally deepen as we consider the profound mysteries of the Incarnation. As we will hear in the Gospel of Luke on Christmas Day, the shepherds, humble and of lowly social status, were the first to receive the good news of Christ's birth. This is a powerful reminder of the inclusivity of the Gospel's message, that Jesus is for all people, no matter their social or economic status. Tonight, we will reflect on 3 beautiful works of art, each of which brings us closer to the heart of the Christmas story. Our first work of art is a stunning stained glass window, the message of the angel to the shepherds, created in the Tiffany Studios in New York in 1900. Louis Comfort Tiffany, an American artist, was known for his distinctive style of colors and intricate details, which perfectly captures the sense of divine revelation and the awe felt by the shepherds upon hearing the angelic announcement. This work of art creates a sense of heavenly light radiating from the scene, reinforcing the sacredness of the moment. Our second work of art is the Adoration of the Shepherds, a painting by the Spanish Baroque artist Bartolomé Esteban Murillo, created around 1650, bringing the humble birth of Christ to life. Murillo beautifully captures the tenderness and reverence of the shepherds as they approach the child Jesus. Our last work of art for tonight is The Rest on the Flight to Egypt, created circa 1620 by Orazio Gentileschi, an Italian Baroque painter, takes us beyond the Nativity to the early life of Christ. This serene moment where Mary and Joseph rest during their flight to safety in Egypt carries a sense of vulnerability and divine protection. Before we begin our reflection on these works, I would like to take a few moments to review the fascinating history and techniques of stained glass. Stained glass windows have been a feature of Christian art for over 1,000 years, with their origins tracing back to early medieval Christianity. The earliest stained glass windows were produced in monasteries and churches, and they served as both decorative elements and educational tools. In a time when the majority of the population was illiterate, stained glass provided a visual narrative of biblical stories, saints, and other sacred themes. The light shining through the colored glass would transform the interior of the church, symbolizing the presence of the divine and creating a mystical atmosphere. The oldest stained glass window is in existence in the Augsburg Cathedral in Bavaria, in Germany, and it's believed to be at the beginning of the 12th century. The technique involves cutting colored glass into pieces and fitting them together to form an image or pattern. Lead came, a type of lead-based strip, was used to hold the pieces of glass together. And the glass was often painted with detailed imagery, then fired in the kiln to set the paint. And we see this here. So they used actually a white glass, used a little bit of silver, and then also kind of a paint to draw in the paintings, the details, and then it was kind of baked into it in the kiln. Over time, artists began to refine their methods, and by the Gothic period, the 12th to the 16th centuries, stained glass windows and stained glass reached its peak, with churches like Notre Dame Cathedral, as I showed the image of the West Rose window last week, and Chartres Cathedral, showcasing some of the most intricate and breathtaking examples of the craft. And here you see the North Rose window with the lancet windows underneath. And the Chartres Cathedral is approximately 50 to 60 miles southwest of Paris. From the middle of the 16th to the 18th century, stained glass windows had fallen out of favor. One reason being the Reformation, which discouraged any type of visual imagery in churches. By the 19th and the early 20th centuries, artists like Louis Comfort Tiffany and John Lafarge brought new innovations to the craft, such as the use of opalescent glass, which allowed for greater subtlety and depth in color. So this is over here. So it's opalescent, some come from opaque. Tiffany also invented Favril glass, generating a shimmer of iridescent on the surface of the glass. Iridescence it's kind of depending on which angle you look at, the color tips, and it's almost like a rainbow-like distribution of the colors across the surface. Since he owned a glass factory, Tiffany had the ability to experiment with glass and create a wide range of different types of glass. For example, ring-mottled glass, ripple glass, and fracture glass, and many others. These different designs and textures allowed Tiffany to paint with glass, rather than paint onto the glass. Many of you might be familiar with Tiffany's iconic, ornate, and colorful lampshades. For example, this Wisteria table lamp, which is made out of over 2,000 pieces of individual glass. Tiffany's distinctive style, known for its luminous colors and intricate details, frequently captures the nuanced changes in nature. This translates well into the magnificent stained glass windows that he produced during his career. One particular remarkable example of Tiffany's stained glass is the Dana Memorial window, which was commissioned in 1913 for the First Baptist Church in Canton, Ohio. And this window was actually just sold on November the 8th in New York, Sotheby's Tiffany for $12.4 million. However, it is beautiful. This detail of the window demonstrates how Tiffany used carefully selected glass to create a painterly impression, and as the light shines through, fills the space with serenity and spirituality. And this is all glass. It's just the way he used different colors and how they melted into each other. And they had thousands and thousands of sheets of glass in the department. And they had employees that's what they did. They were glass selectors. So they knew the project And they had seen the drawings because a cartoon was being prepared, and they would go through hundreds and hundreds of shards of glass to find the perfect glass to make all this happen, to make this come alive. Another example is the Hartwell Memorial Window, created for the Central Baptist Church, Providence, Rhode Island in 1917. This window is now housed at the Art Institute in Chicago, and some of you might have seen it. It is absolutely stunning, and it's considered one of Tiffany's masterpieces. Tiffany's windows were not only beautiful works of art, but also a reflection of his philosophy. His goal was to create windows that invited light in and allowed it to interact with the colors in ways that made the spiritual experience more immersive. And with this brief introduction of stained glass history and techniques, I now invite you to reflect on our works of art of tonight. Our first work of art of the evening is The Message of the Angel to the Shepherds. It is a stained glass window located at the Arlington Street Church in Boston, Massachusetts. It was created in Tiffany's Studios, New York, under the artistic guidance of Louis Comfort Tiffany. And the window was installed in 1900 in memory of the Brown family. And as I introduce the artist, you can follow along in the handout. Louis Comfort Tiffany was born on February 18, 1848 in New York City. He was a key figure in the world of decorative arts, particularly renowned for his stained glass and innovative glass work. He was the son of Charles Louis Tiffany, the founder of the iconic jewelry company Tiffany & Co. His artistic talents were evident from a young age, and he went on to pursue a career in the arts, deeply influenced by his travels across Europe and North Africa. In 1879, Tiffany founded a decorative company, Louis C. Tiffany and Associate Artists, alongside Samuel Coleman, Candace Wheeler, and Lockwood de Forest. This group worked on a variety of projects, from interior decoration to textiles. In 1900, Tiffany established Tiffany Studios, his own glass-making firm. Color and light are the features that make Tiffany lamps the remarkable and sought-after objects that they are today. Although Tiffany was first recognized for his stained glass windows, particularly after the innovation of his Freville glass technology in 1894, it is the lead-glassed lamps that have ensured his legacy. Tiffany Studios was a commercial enterprise with a large number of employees in the manufacturing as well as the design departments. The design for this particular stained glass window was by Frederick Wilson, the head of the ecclesiastic department. Just to briefly touch on it, it was unusual for the time, but Tiffany also employed women, workers and designers. And one was, for example, Clara Driscoll, who headed the women's glass cutting department, while Agnes Northrop designed many of the firm's landscape windows. And I have written a catalog entry about some of the works of Tiffany, and then while I was in the library, there's also a couple of kind of novellas or novels about the Tiffany girls, as they were called. So just kind of an interesting, they give you a little bit of an insight how the working conditions were and what the jobs of the women were while they were working for Tiffany. He seems to be quite thinking forward. However, there was a catch. Women were only allowed to work for him while they were not married. So once they got married, they had to leave the firm. But I guess one step at a time, isn't it? Tiffany's nature-inspired, colorful glass fell out of favor at the time of World War I, as prevailing tastes of the late 1910s and 1920s leaned toward minimal ornamentation. Tiffany Studios declared bankruptcy in 1932, and Louis Comfort Tiffany died the following year. As you consider our first work of art of the evening, I will quote from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 2, verses 9 and 10. The angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them. The angel said to them, "Do not be afraid, for behold, I proclaim to you good news of great joy that will be for all the people." And now I open the floor for your thoughts, impressions, and reflections, and please feel free to share them. And once again, Amelia will help us with the microphone. Amelia. Thank you.
Technical question first. Do you know about how long it took him and his associates to make that? How long did it take him and his associates to make that?
Oh, well, I don't know the exact time, but I know that quite a large number of workmen would work on a work like of this. So it was divided into different levels. So someone like the artist, Frederick Wilson, he would come up with the design per se, and then it needed to be drawn out in a larger size to then come up with the ideas, how do we break this down? And then it was colored in to get some sense of which colors are being used where. And we will talk about this. For example, the angel's head is very light, and then you need a radiant color. So that would all be colored in. And then from that, they would produce a cartoon, and I've mentioned that before. A cartoon is a life-size or the finished size drawing of the object that they are making. And then they would literally have every single piece outlined on this cartoon, and there was a color coding for that. And then you had, so that was kind of the creative part of it and the drawing part. And then you had, for example, like the Tiffany women, they would usually work in the lamp department. They weren't so much involved in the windows, but you had selectors. As I say, they had some sense of, okay, we want to do some light brown tones, we want some streaking. Then they would, as I say, they would go through these hundreds and hundreds of sheets of brown tone glass and try to find the perfect piece. And then you had special workers that were, their job was to put this together. So there are many steps, and it definitely, depending on the size of a window like that, obviously it takes quite a while, but there are multiple people would work together on a project like that. Yeah. And with this, I find with stained glass windows, one has to look more to see more. Stained glass windows are sometimes overwhelming because I think they try to bring in a lot of information and a lot of details into it.
Did Tiffany actually create the glass pieces, or did he have someone that worked under him that created these different colors? And
Yes, so he was definitely part of the initial creative process. So he would go in and kind of mix some colors together and work out different techniques. But then eventually, once that was worked out, again, there would be a large group of people who would create these sheets of glass. Yeah. And maybe we can just walk into this a little bit. So, who do we see? Who's here? I mean, obviously, the title kind of gives it away. So yeah, we have the angel, and it takes up more than half of the entire image. So it's very, very dominant. And then over here, we have a group of shepherds. And just to, and we can talk about this. And so the angel, even though I said Tiffany painted with glass rather than on glass, however, he did, for example, they would draw in like the faces, because that was obviously, you couldn't do that with glass. I mean, there's just so much detail you're able to generate in the glass. So I have a little detail of this. So the faces, these, like the eyes and the lips, and so that would have been drawn in, and then, as I said, they would put it back into a kiln to kind of bake it and bind it to the glass. But I think, again, this is so beautiful. So we have the angel, he's holding his arm, his beautiful wings, all the all the details of just even the wings of the angel. There's like a radiant rays coming out on the side, and I think this is it's a beautiful detail there as well. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah.
Couple of comments. One is that the shepherds are very earthy and the angel is very angelic.
Uh-huh.
Number two is that where the heck are all the sheep? I just see one, and it seems like sheep would be a wonderful thing in a stained glass painting.
Yeah,
And-
so the sheep is down here in the
There
corner.
is one sheep. But, and the shepherds look pretty tough. They look pretty worn, which is a little maybe surprising compared with the angel.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the details. Yeah.
I'm struck by the shepherds and the different expression. Kind of the one on the top is kind of, almost glad, and the next one down, he almost looks a little mad or maybe a little incredulous about the whole thing. And then the last one is just, or the last two are just kind of overtaken by the whole thing. But they've got very different expressions. Like they've got very different people.
Yes. And I think that's beautiful how you even could work this in. We often think of a painting where an artist has more of the ability to bring in more differences in the expression. But on the glass, on the window, and then on the glass, he was able to do that. Again, yeah, I think with the hands, the shepherd at the very top, bringing his hands to his mouth. It's like, yeah, we always hear, it always strikes me when we hear, don't be afraid. It's just, we hear it over and over again, but I think it must be an unbelievable experience if one would go through this. Can you use the microphone? Sorry.
Sorry. I think it portrays very well that they are in awe of what they are seeing, and they mentioned like no other sheep being around, but the one that's there, it seems like it's getting closer to the shepherds, like it's afraid. So you would wonder if like all the other sheep were also bowing down, as like nature tends to do to great amazing things, right, that happen. It seems like the birds know when a storm is coming, mm-hmm. and they go away, and like things like that. And to me, that's what this is depicting. Like they are, even the sheep is in reverence of the great being that's before them.
Yes, yeah, I think that's beautiful. Yeah, and also we see the Star of Bethlehem kind of shining through the sleeve of the angel. So I think that's very good. And even down, so we found the sheep, and as you beautifully say, it kind of draws really close to the shepherd. And then even in the distance, Frederick Wilson kind of gave us a hint of probably Bethlehem. So because in the Gospel of Luke, we hear that the shepherds are just outside of Bethlehem in the fields, watching after their flock. And yeah, just to pick up on, so yeah, the angel is in bright colors, very angelic. The shepherds, kind of darker colors, earthy tones, but their faces are, at least for of these three, they're dazzled by the light of the angel. So they're light, and again the expressions on their faces are beautiful. Yeah, so this is the first stained glass window we have looked at in our series. And I was a bit nervous about it because it's kind of hard to see, but then I think once we kind of get used to it, things are kind of coming out, and it's easy to see. And I think it's probably at many places, if we go and visit churches, and even our beautiful church has the stunning stained glass, and it would probably take a while, because if one just casually looks at it, one is dazzled by the color, but not necessarily understands the story or the parts that are depicted in there. So stained glass windows, for me, it takes a little while to kind of get into it and read it.
I am just amazed because I'm familiar with Tiffany lamps, but I am not familiar with Tiffany windows in churches. And it's just amazing the extent of the quality and the character of those people that are there, and the depth with the presence of the Bethlehem in the distance from the starlight. I mean, and then around the edges, all of those beautiful flowers that just complement the colors within the main picture. I had no concept.
Oh.
So I appreciate so much bringing this here, because I think of the Tiffany lamp. But this is just amazing. So thank you.
Thank you. Margaret.
I would just like to add to what you were saying. I always learn from these sessions, but also even on our walk down this evening. I learned, with the construction of the new building that Mayo Clinic is putting up, Calvary is kind of encapsulated, right? But they removed their stained glass windows, and I didn't know until this evening, Laura mentioned, they're Tiffany stained glass windows.
That's right. Yeah, some of them are Tiffany's, yes. Yeah.
I was just going to say that as
yeah. They've removed them maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, so they brought them somewhere up in Minneapolis to store them, but also to do restoration work on them. So once everything is up and safe, then they will return, yes.
Yeah. The color blue is so essential. Without it, it just wouldn't be the same. His use of the blue color.
Yes, yeah. And I think that's, Marc Chagall took great advantage of that. So Marc Chagall, many of his paintings, he used to use blue, but if you go to Chicago and you see the Hartwell Memorial window, as you come up the staircase, Marc Chagall also has some of his stained glass windows are at the Chicago Museum, and the blue is just stunning. It's absolutely gorgeous. So, yes. Oh yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed this. I was a little bit nervous about this, so I'm glad this worked out. And now we can maybe look at stained glass windows with a fresh eye and a little bit different, and start to kind of read it. So we will leave this picture with the following question: do I listen to the angel's voice proclaiming the good news? And so now it is time for our second work of art. It is the painting The Adoration of the Shepherds by Bartolome Esteban Murillo, painted circa 1650. And again, you can follow along on the handout. Murillo, born in Seville, Spain in 1617, was known as the greatest religious painter of his age. He lived and worked in Seville his entire life, and his art, particularly the religious sphere, was firmly aligned with the ideals of the Catholic Counter-Reformation. During his childhood, Seville remained the foremost city in Spain, equal in power and population to Venice, Amsterdam, and even Madrid. Seville had long held the monopoly on trade with the New World until its commercial fortune started to decline after the mid-17th century. Almost half of Seville's population was wiped out in the plague of 1647 to 1652, a catastrophe followed by famine, recession, and trade rebellion. Partly in reaction to this economic disintegration, Seville's religious orders, the Franciscans, Dominicans, and Capuchins, dedicated their considerable resources towards charity and commissioning artworks to both give hope to the populace and artistically reinforce the Counter-Reformation. Murillo's spiritual devotion can be seen in his many depictions of the Virgin Mary, saints, and other religious subjects. His style, characterized by softness, warmth, and light, set him apart from some of his more dramatic Baroque contemporaries. Murillo also painted the lives of ordinary people, especially the marginalized and impoverished. His tender depictions of beggars and street children reflect his sensitivity to human suffering, providing a more humanized and empathetic view of the lower classes. Murillo died aged 65 in 1682, resulting from a fall from scaffolding while painting a fresco in the Capuchin church in Cadiz, leaving behind an impressive body of work that reflects both the religious fervor and the human compassion of his time. As you consider our second work of art of this evening, I will quote from Luke chapter 2, verses 16 and 17. So they went with haste and found Mary and Joseph and the child lying in the manger. When they saw this, they made known what had been told them about this child. And with this, I invite you to comment on this painting. Whom do we see? And I just want to put this out. So shepherds, why the shepherds? And what are the ranks of a shepherd, particularly around this time? And I think that might also have changed our perception about it.
So I have a question maybe first. Is it 3 shepherds or 4 shepherds? Would we consider one of them to be Joseph or?
Correct. So this is Joseph, and then these 2 are shepherds. And there's an older woman.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
so we have 2 shepherds.
It's like a fun play on like the 3 kings. We have 3 not so lofty figures who seem to also be bringing gifts to the Christ child. We have like the sheep and the eggs and the chickens. So it's nice. I don't know. I like that as a different version of gift giving.
Yes, exactly. So that's really well picked up. It is kind of the opposite version of the Magi. They're also coming with gifts. In the Magi, they were in fancy dresses, and they had the gold and the myrrh. But the shepherds brought their own gifts, and we can it's the eggs in the basket, it's the sheep and the two hens down here.
Thank you. And I think too, Murillo really depicted the poverty, the difference of the shepherds. They have skins to cover themselves because they were out there in the cold, and they have sheepskins covering their bodies. He's portraying, like really seeing like the difference, like you say, of the Magi, but just even of Joseph and Mary. They are no shoes, just really he's able to show the poverty, but I think also it might go farther than just the outside, because the belief is Jesus came to save us. He came to the poor, the meek, the needy, but not just of body, but like of spirit. So I think he's just like showing all of that in this.
Yes, yeah, oh, absolutely, beautiful. It is, he did come to the poor, he did come to the people in need. The message, the good news was not declared to priests and scribes and wealthy people first. Yes?
Ulrike, I am not familiar with the Catholic Counter-Reformation, so I don't know if you can say anything about that, just briefly. And then, do I see a tomb off on the left-hand side?
There is some building structure there. Go this way. Maybe a bit far. I mean, it's more like a pillar, I would say, but yeah. But we do have. Come back on this side. Sorry. We do also have the donkey is kind of hiding in the far back, and then the ox as well. Just to quickly answer your question, so Counter-Reformation. So the Reformations started in 1517 with the 95 Theses that Luther had nailed onto the church. And so that was in going against the Catholic Church, who he felt was selling indulgences so people could kind of buy their way into heaven. And so, I mean, I think that's boils it down to the minimum explanation. So the Reformation started, and then with the Council of Trent, years later, the Catholic Church came together and said, we really need to try to fight against this, and then again, there's many more aspects to this, but sticking to the art. One aspect of that was to say, we need to create art that the ordinary person can read, can understand, and we can teach them, again, because many people were illiterate, we can help them to understand the Bible, the stories in the Bible, and it actually means something to them. Just some art stories, because we came out of the Renaissance, and Mannerism was part of that, and Mannerism style was a bit odd. I mean, figures were very twisted, the scene were quite often a little bit chaotic, so it was very difficult for the normal person to really read what was going on. And so the Counter-Reformation, in terms of the art, not commenting on other aspects, really try to make simpler images using beautiful colors that really speak to the viewer, to the person who would look at the works of art. Yeah.
I just wanted to comment on looking at the picture here and looking up there. The radiance of the child, Jesus, is huge. I mean, in terms of just lit up, okay? As well as the face of Mary is lit up. Joseph, on the other hand, is just one of the guys. You know, he almost looks like a shepherd back there, you know. And so anyway.
Yes. Oh, yeah. So yes, we have in this painting, it is the Baroque, so we have a little bit, we have chiaroscuro placed into it, where chiaroscuro, we use one source of light, a strong source of light that kind of, in this case, comes kind of probably from up here and illuminates Jesus, the baby Christ child. And also that kind of with the white, it kind of probably reflects onto Mary's face. And I love her red cheeks. She's so in the moment with the child. And then, because if you are on stage and you have a strong light on you, pretty much everything very quickly falls into a little bit of the shadows. And that's what happens here as well, I think. And then, not to make a long story out of it, we talked about Joseph's role and how he developed through the arts. Very early in early Renaissance depiction, Joseph was even further pushed into the back. Quite often he was depicted sleeping. So this is actually a pretty good spot for him. He's quite close to the action. So, right, yes.
Just one piece of follow-up to what Laura was saying about that being a tomb. If it was a tomb, it would fit with the narrative of the baby came ultimately to die for our salvation. So maybe it is a tomb.
Right, in all of it, actually, coming back to the gifts, the basket with the eggs is actually symbolizes the resurrection. So kind of thinking of new life bursting out of the shell, so new life bursting out of the tomb. The lamb is obviously a reference to the Lamb of God, Jesus dying for us, for our sin. And then also the hens are, so I think there's, if it hen/rooster, it could foretell the story of Peter denying Jesus 3 times. In this case, it's hens quite often are used as a symbol for the nurturing love of God. He wants to kind of pull us under his wings. So I think they certainly have a dual role potentially in this painting. But yes, there's a lot of symbolism in this painting, foreshadowing and telling us already, even though we're celebrating the birth of Jesus Christ, we already think of his sacrifice later on in his life. I was actually, since I was looking up symbolism, and it's always fascinating, and I thought, maybe many people ask themselves, when we put up our crypt, why is there an ox in there? And the ox is a symbol of sacrifice and service and strength. And then also, he's slowly progressing, but very effective in the end. So that's kind of the symbolism of the ox. And we do have to move on. You were mentioning earlier the way the shepherds were portrayed, and it is just kind of the shepherds were the lowest in the social class, particularly at the time of Christ's birth. There were outcasts. The scribes were very negative about them because they had to work all the time, right? They were out on the fields. They couldn't keep the Sabbath because they couldn't say to the sheep, okay, it's Saturday, you're not going to get any food. But that created some friction, obviously, because they couldn't celebrate the Sabbath as it was required from them. And they were living in the dark. I mean, just think, there was no light, right? There was no street lights. There was nothing. So those were men that would live in the open, in the wilderness. They had to be harsh. Coming back to the stained glass window, when we said, Margaret, you were saying that their faces were kind of harsh, but that's what their daily life were. They were outside all the time. So they were on a very low class socially, but it is so beautiful that the good news was brought to them first. So really, Jesus wanted to pull all of us for the good news. And Caravaggio kind of started this to painting people as they were, so not beautifying the people. He painted the man with dirty fingernails. He painted the man with dirty feet. And so obviously Murillo was exposed to the works of Caravaggio, and it's very typical for works of Murillo to depict people the way they are. Some of them might be familiar with the children, the street children playing, and they're just so, that's how they were. They were playing in the dust and in the dirt, and that's how Murillo would depict them. So just really beautiful.
Thank you. I think he really carried that throughout, because like even in another representations of Mary and Joseph, they make Mary so beautiful, right? Like just no flaw, right? And here and also she was younger than Joseph, and here you have more of that real life depiction of like real how things really were. There's a very young girl. She looks like a 15, 16-year-old girl, where he looks mature. In again, the dirt, the lady, the woman that came to help, she is definitely old. There was no added beauty to any of the people there. They were just portrayed as they were.
Yeah.
I was wondering if the elderly woman symbolized her cousin, Elizabeth.
It could be, particularly throughout the couple of weeks we talked about Elizabeth, but also her mother. I mean, there's no reference in the Bible that either of them were there. So it could be an interpretation like that, yes. Just need to move on. Just to kind of, Murillo also painted the same scene again, somewhat later in his life. So this was between 1665 and 1617, and this painting is at the Wallace Collection in London. And first of all, he kind of flipped it around. He added a couple of elements, but I thought it's really interesting how his color palette changed, and we have seen that a couple of times. For example, with Rembrandt, when he was younger, he had quite intense colors, and as he grew older, his palette was more even in brown tones, and so I think we're seeing this here in Murillo as well. We could talk about this as well, because I think it's also a beautiful depiction. But we need to move on.
I apologize, Ulrike, I can't stay for the next one, but this is our last in the series. So I want to reach out to all those that are watching on live stream. I can hear their applause already. Because this has been an extraordinary gift that you've given over these years. 3 years now, I think?
3 years, yep.
Yeah, but I know you do an enormous amount of work. You spend significant time. You're very competent and professional, and you share your faith. So let's love her up. This is a tremendous. Yeah. Yeah. It's very exceptional. And there's like 250 households out there or more connected with us. So it's a treasure. Yeah. And the nativity that we set up in the church each year, does not have an ox, but I'm going to get one.
Donkey will do too. Yes, so we will leave this we move on to this one. I will read out my question because I have to say those take me the longest to come up. So the question for this painting is, am I one of the shepherds adoring the Christ child and spreading the news, sorry I forgot the S, about his birth? Our last painting of this evening is The Rest of the Flight to Egypt by Italian Baroque painter Orazio Gentileschi from around 1620. And yes, please use the handout if that's helpful. Orazio Gentileschi was born in Pisa, Italy in 1563 into a family of artists. In 1576-78, he moved to Rome where he assumed the name Gentileschi, and that came from a maternal uncle. Not much is known about his artistic training and his early works. At the beginning of 1600, Orazio's style changed under the influence of Caravaggio, acquiring greater naturalism. However, this artistic phase was short-lived, and he returned to more refined classicizing style. Gentileschi's work often explores religious and mythologic themes, and he was known for his skill in creating powerful, emotive compositions. He painted a variety of subjects, including altarpieces, portraits, and allegorical works. Some of his most notable pieces include his depictions of biblical heroines, like Judas slaying Holofernes, a theme later revisited in the works of his daughter, Artemisia Gentileschi, who became one of the most famous female artists of the Baroque period. Following his time in Rome, Gentileschi moved to Genoa, where he continued to paint, and in the 1620s, he relocated to London, where he became court painter to King Charles I of England. His time in England was relatively quiet in terms of surviving works, but his influence on his daughter Artemisia was profound. He died following an illness in 1639 at the age of 76, and he was granted the honor of burial in the Queen's Chapel at Somerset House. Gentileschi's legacy, while not as widely known as Caravaggio's, helped shape the Baroque movement, and his innovative approach to light, texture, and emotional depth continued to influence subsequent generations of artists. And as you consider our last work of this evening, I will quote from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 2, verse 13. The angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Rise, take the child and his mother, flee to Egypt, and stay there until I tell you." And so, whom do we see on this painting? And how do we see it?
Joseph's return to sleeping. But it does depict just the exhaustion of having to pick up, and it looks like bring one bag of stuff for 3 people and be on the road for a long time.
Right, yes. Amelia, Edward?
Thank you. I will comment about Joseph sleeping. I'm not defend him right now, because so God communicated to Joseph through dreams. Before he took Mary as his wife, right? He communicated with him, of course, to save them and get them out out of Nazareth into Egypt. He continued communicating like that, right? So maybe that's part of one of the things that they're trying to show. That's one of the things that I see in the painting is the wall, right? And they are running, they're getting away from Nazareth to go, they're fleeing, right? So it kind of like shows a little bit like hiding, keeping in the low, just trying to keep them safe, in maybe showing how much even Joseph is doing in that, right? And he's taking his family out of there, the stress, that how tired he must have been to do everything that he had to do for that. So I think that's what I see with the wall. And
Yes. Yes, beautiful.
Two things are really striking. One is that baby is not a baby. That's a toddler. Was he actually 2 when they left?
So Herod, we don't know exactly the age, but Herod commanded that all children up to the age of 2 had to be killed. So we don't know exactly how soon after Jesus' birth they left Bethlehem, but it can be assumed that he was at least younger than 2.
they believe that the Magi got there not right away, right? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the second thing is that's a very large donkey. And you know there are mammoth donkeys that people ride, even now.
Maybe it's a mule.
No, it's a donkey.
It's a donkey. Okay. I'm afraid I can't argue with Margaret about donkeys and horses and
Etc.
I think one of the uniqueness of the picture is that Mary is suckling Jesus, and for me that's at that suckling and the importance of mother's milk is absolutely critical for survival of children in that age, and yet it's there, and you don't even think about the whole importance of suckling your infant by the mother. It's critical for their survival. So anyway, so that was probably the thing that struck me the most about.
And I mean, there are quite a few images throughout the history where we see that Mary is feeding the Christ child. So it's not an unusual depiction. I mean, it's not usual, but it's not something scandalous or something. As you say, because it was so important, there was no formula, right? For a child to survive, it had to be being fed by the mother. And I think it's so, yes, he's not a baby, he's a toddler, but he's looking straight at us. I think that's really interesting too. So the child is trying to engage with us.
Yeah, I think alongside that sort of like the intimacy of feeding your child and Jesus looking right at us. And my dad was just saying, like, that doesn't look like a comfortable sleeping position.
No.
It just is very like anxiety producing, the whole setup, whether it's like sort of the off-centeredness of the donkey's head or just the storm clouds and the way that Mary's foot is off the ground. It just feels very like, it's very in motion with that, like we're fleeing really quickly and we're hiding, as was said.
Yes. Oh, yeah. So, do you think, talking about Joseph? Yes, he is depicted sleeping again, but I think this time it's really the exhaustion, and the whole image it expresses kind of a weariness, isn't it? So it's as you say, unsettling a little bit, but comes back to they were fleeing, they were hiding, they didn't have protection. Again, the path they were choosing wasn't probably particularly safe necessarily. They had to be careful not to be robbed. And yes, it's not a comfortable position. I mean, I think no one would, unless you're so tired, you don't care about anything that's happening to you. That's maybe the position you would fall asleep in. And so just kind of Gentileschi actually produced at least 4 other versions of this painting. One is at the Louvre, one is in Vienna, one is in Birmingham, and I forgot the 4th one. And they're kind of similar, but not identical. And with the wall, so 2 of the versions have just a closed wall. And then some of the, this one and then this one, they have kind of a broken wall in it, and then just, he chose just hours in this one, I think this is in the Birmingham, where he included the donkey. And I think that the donkey is, he's waiting so patiently. I thought that was beautiful too. He wasn't bound to anything. It's again, donkeys were animals of service, and so he was devoted to Joseph and Mary. So he was
I
staying
think
there.
the donkey is a watch donkey. He's like looking out for them.
Yes. Yeah, and then also the dark clouds. So things are not good. I mean, they are on the run, and things might happen.
The sterility of the scene, like they're out in the middle of nowhere in some city that used to exist, but now it's just a few bricks, walls partially there. You don't see a tree, you don't see water. Obviously it's a very tough kind of image that he's portraying there in terms of survival, or, in terms of that space.
Yes, yeah.
I know you were mentioning about the donkey, and I just started thinking maybe a symbolism, because so a donkey is what she rides into Bethlehem as she's looking for a place to give birth, and takes them out of there to flee. And then when Jesus comes in the what's the celebration when he comes in Palm Sunday, the Palm thing?
Right.
So when he comes in, he rides a donkey as well. So maybe it's just there to put it all together and some kind of symbolism.
Yes, so it's also probably a donkey is compared to a mule and a horse. It's kind of the lowly class of animals. But again, it's the one. So Jesus didn't choose to ride into Jerusalem on a fancy horse. He chose again the donkey. So yes, I think it's yes. And I know my husband is signaling me. We are over time, but it was such a wonderful discussion and reflection. So sorry we went over a little bit, but again, thank you very much for coming. Thank you for listening, and thank you for reflecting on these beautiful works of art that we have seen here. And Merry Christmas.